At a certain point, story structure stopped being a theory. It became a doctrine. Rules were written, laws were taught, right and wrong ways to tell a story were declared with absolute certainty. So what happens when structure becomes gospel? Does it reveal the deeper mechanics of meaning, or replace creative instinct with obedience? This is the investigation anatomy of story, a personal search for the hidden patterns beneath all stories. Case file number 3 is open, and it's where I examine how structure became scripture, why it worked, and what it lost when writers stopped questioning the rules meant to set them free. This time we're not dealing with philosophy or myth, we're dealing with doctrine and dissection, the gospel of structure, and the autopsy it demands. Some teachers hand you a map, others hand you a flashlight. But a rare few grab your script, hold it up to the light, and tell you whether it's alive or whether you should just call it. That's McKee and Truby, the preacher and the surgeon. They blamed the map. That's the part that should make you uneasy. Because once a system decides the map is sacred, it stops looking at the ground beneath its feet. Stories don't fail anymore, writers do. Scripts don't struggle, they're broken. And structure, once a way of seeing, becomes a way of sorting. This is where craft turns into compliance, where models stop explaining why stories work and start deciding which ones are allowed to exist at all. Robert McKee was a failed writer who refused to quit. He'd seen the trenches, Hollywood rewrites, studio silence, rejected manuscripts piling up like casualties of war, and came back with scripture. His own disappointments had been transformed, alchemized into certainty. The pain of rejection became the foundation of his authority. He believed story wasn't formula, it was law. Something older than cinema, deeper than dialogue, more fundamental than plot. He spoke of structure as if it had been encoded in our DNA since humans first gathered around fires to make sense of the darkness. He wasn't selling a shortcut, he was selling salvation. A path to redemption for every lost writer wandering in the wilderness of the blank page. John Truby came from a different church. Logic, psychology, cause and effect. Where McKee thundered about truth, Truby dissected it under bright lights, with precision tools and the clinical detachment of a man who believes everything can be understood if properly broken down. His classroom wasn't a pulpit, but an operating theatre. He treated stories like moral equations. Desire plus weakness equals change. Character divided by obstacle multiplied by revelation equals transformation. His approach was mathematical, almost sterile in its precision. McKee wanted faith and structure, Truby wanted reason. Both wanted control over the chaos of creation. Both offered writers something to cling to in the storm. McKee's story lectures were theatre, pounding fists, roaring about values and meaning, his voice rising to fill every corner of the room. Sweat beaded on his brow as he delivered his sermon. He said, "Story is about truth and how the world works." And the writers nodded, desperate to believe someone had decoded the mystery. For him, structure wasn't a skeleton. It was his philosophy, a system of human cause and consequence, as intricate and invaluable as the tides. His hands would sketch invisible patterns in the air, mapping the invisible forces that bind character to fate. He broke story into acts, beats, and reversals. But what mattered most was value change. Love to hate, courage to fear, life to death. Every scene had to shift the moral ground. The landscape had to transform with each step the character took. The world itself responding to their choices like a living thing. Truby stripped that further, down to 7 steps. Weakness, need, desire, opponent, plan, battle, self-revelation. His approach was surgical, cutting away anything unnecessary, anything that couldn't be justified by his system of psychological cause and effect. No preaching, no myth, just mechanism. The skeleton became a circuit, a machine that could be assembled, disassembled, examined and replicated. The messy miracle of story reduced to components and connections. 2 men, 1 goal, to give writers a way to make meaning out of mess, to transform the terrifying freedom of the blank page into a map with clear directions. McKee's fingerprints are everywhere. American Beauty, Breaking Bad, The Dark Knight. Stories obsessed with moral consequence, with decay and redemption. You can see his influence in the way these narratives build, scene by scene, towards moments of devastating truth. You can feel his voice echoing behind every speech about truth, every confrontation where characters strip away lies to reveal the raw wounds beneath, every third act where the protagonist faces the consequences of their choices. Truby's influence runs quieter. Inside Out, External Sunshine, Parasite. Stories that don't lecture but unfold like therapy sessions. Each beat driven by need, not plot. Characters who change not because the story demands it, but because their psychological journey makes it inevitable. His approach leaves no fingerprints, only the sense that everything happened exactly as it should. They taught that structure isn't architecture, it's anatomy, not something imposed from without, but something that grows from within. The bones that allow the body to stand, the organs that keep it alive. Every choice reveals character, every consequence reveals truth, every moment connected to every other moment in a web of meaning so tight that nothing is accidental. Nothing wasted. But gospel comes with dogma. Every religion eventually calcifies around its own rules. McKee's followers wrote by rules. Truby's disciples treated emotion like algebra. The systems that were meant to liberate became constraints. The maps became prisons. Writers stopped asking questions. They started quoting verses. They stopped listening to their own instincts and started following formulas. The mystery of creation was replaced by the certainty of prescription. The sermons worked. They made order out of fear, but order kills mystery. The mystery is what makes a story breathe, what gives it life beyond the mechanics, beyond the structure. You can learn every reversal, every 7-step shift, and still miss the human pulse. The inexplicable thing that makes a story feel alive rather than assembled. McKee gave writers a spine. Truby gave them organs, the tools to stand, to function, to process experience into meaning. But the soul, that's up to you. That's the part no system can teach, no structure can guarantee. The ineffable spark that makes a story more than the sum of its parts. They weren't wrong, they just mistook structure for salvation. They confused the map with the territory, the recipe with the meal. The best stories don't follow commandments, they wrestle with them. They understand the rules deeply enough to know when to break them, when to bend them, when to transcend them altogether. The gospel of structure teaches us one thing: meaning can be mapped, but it can't be manufactured. You can chart the journey, but you can't force the revelation. So what happens when structure becomes law? Stories stop being explored, they start being processed. Structure was never meant to decide what stories should exist. It was meant to help us understand why the ones that survive do. When rules replace judgment, no one takes responsibility. Not the reader, not the producer, not the system. And that's how you end up with perfectly structured scripts that no one remembers, and writers who did everything right except tell the truth. And if you want the case files in your hands, there's a downloadable PDF waiting below. Your written brief for everything we've covered here and how to use it in your own writing. Details are in the description. I'm Terry Dre, and this is the Investigation Anatomy of Story. Case file 3 is now closed. Till the next one opens, be seeing you.